Hi everyone. My name is Daniel Alexander. I'm with the City and County of Honolulu, Department of Transportation Services, and I'm a Complete Streets Planner and the Vision Zero Coordinator for the city. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Good. Basically, we work on our streets at a planning level of thinking about different things that we can do with them than what's out there now, how we can address some of the challenges that might exist for the people using those streets, whether they're walking, have a mobility challenge, bicycling, using some other form of rolling device, or driving, taking transit. Really, that's what we're doing. And let me just check if Renee is on yet. Renee, you on yet?
I'm here. Yep, I'm here.
Okay. I just started with an introduction. So I beat you here.
No worries.
Cool. So I won't. I know Renee is going to discuss our Complete Streets program in more detail, so I won't jump the gun on that. But yeah, that's the introduction for me, and I'll go ahead and hand it off to Renee.
Hi, Roger. Hi, everyone. My name is Renee Espio, and I work with Daniel and Justin at City and County of Honolulu. We are transportation planners. So we work with engineers very closely and doing roadway projects, primarily for safety. And I've got some projects to share, but nice to meet you. Justin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you, everyone. As Renee mentioned, my name is Justin Menina. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Just graduated class of 2020 with a double major in political science and economics. In my capacity as a transportation program specialist for our city's Complete Streets program, my main role is a support role in engaging with the community, primarily with community outreach, engagement, and curation of content, as well as keeping our website up to date primarily, and also making sure it looks good as well. Thank you.
The Complete Streets program with City and County of Honolulu. Just want to open up with this rendering of a two-way protected bikeway. This actually is a project that's planned for Bishop Street in downtown Honolulu. We, envision these kinds of projects working with different community members, and we like to do these sort of photo simulations so that people who are not professionals and cannot read transportation plans can sort of see what kind of changes are being proposed. So just wanted to open with that. So Complete Streets is a street design approach that considers all different people that use the street. I think when most of us think of a roadway, we tend to think of cars using that roadway. And of course, we've mostly designed our streets for the movement of vehicles and for cars. But there's many other people trying to use our local streets. There's people walking, biking, people in wheelchairs, there's the bus. There are people, doing business, loading, unloading. There's all sorts of different needs of our urban streets. And sometimes the way our streets are designed today does not always accommodate all those different needs safely. So our job is to figure out ways to improve the design of our streets and see if they can serve our communities in a better fashion. Complete Streets actually is a city and county law. So we adopted this in 2012, and it says basically every time we touch a street, so if we were repaving a street or something, we have to consider all the different people who want to use that roadway. So what we do is we typically envision those changes ahead of time, and then when a project comes up, say even like a sewer or a water project, something that rips up the roadway, we have an opportunity to put back changes when they fix the road. And there's lots of different reasons to do this stuff, but as you can see here, the number one goal really is to avoid crashes and make sure everyone is safe. This is a kind of underlying principle that we follow, that one of our major goals is to really control the speed of cars on our local streets. If you are a pedestrian and you are hit by a car traveling at 20 miles per hour, there's about a 9 out of 10 chance that you're going to survive that crash if you're the pedestrian. On the other end of the spectrum, if a car is driving 45 miles per hour, there's about a 9 out of 10 chance that you will not survive that incident. So one of our goals really is to try to control speeds and bring it down slower to be more consistent with people who are not driving out on the roadway. And then, you guys are going to get into lots of different principles about traffic engineering, I'm sure, through your program this summer. But one of the, kind of cardinal rules of traffic engineering is that you design your streets for, say, the morning rush hour and the afternoon rush hour, right? So you take the busiest time and then you size your streets appropriately. Can you guys think of a problem with that approach? What happens for the other 22 hours of the day when traffic is not that high? Then we end up with streets that are basically too big, too wide, very hard to cross, and with less traffic, then people can speed on those streets as well. So just something for you guys to explore as you learn more about this profession this summer. And one of our particularly vulnerable populations that we're always worried about is our kupuna, our seniors. Our grandma and grandpa and everybody. A lot of those people don't drive because either they don't feel comfortable, they don't have a driver's license anymore, or they take the bus because it's cheaper or whatever reason. A lot of those people are out walking and trying to get around on our streets. And unfortunately, we actually have a very high fatality rate for senior pedestrians. So just some of the risks of having streets that are not designed for everybody who may be using them. And then, talking a bit about bicycles, we do bicycle projects, and those of you who live on Oahu, I'm sure, are somewhat familiar with, say, the King Street Protected Bikeway. One of our goals is to do better bicycle projects. Long time we did bicycle lanes where we just painted a stripe and then hoped people would ride there, but we're learning that there is sort of, about half of people would like to bike, but don't feel safe with those sort of minimal bike facilities or with no facility. So what we're really trying to get to is building sort of safe bicycle facilities that attract the most number of people. And a lot of those people are very reluctant to mix in traffic, I personally being one of them. So we do a lot of bike projects. Another one of our charges is to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So as you guys can see from this pie chart, this is on Oahu. About half of our greenhouse gas emissions are from the transportation sector. So aviation makes up a huge part of that. Obviously, we're not suggesting people walk or bike to the mainland or neighbor islands, but on highway, this is kind of our area here where we can try to provide facilities to shift people who may be able to leave their car at home and maybe take a more sustainable means of getting around, either a bus or walk or bike. So that's kind of one of our climate goals as well. And then related to that, we do a number of improvements with street trees. This shows some examples of new trees being planted, and then stormwater quality, working on some permeable pavements here so that when the stormwater or rainwater hits the street, which is another function of our roadways, right, is to capture stormwater and channel it. The stormwater can actually percolate down into the ground instead of just being flushed through a large concrete channel out into the ocean, which is not good for our reefs and for our ocean health. And then the picture on the right shows a Silva-cell installation, which goes underneath the sidewalk and provides lots of space for tree roots to grow. So we can get nice, healthy trees on our streets too. So if you do walk, there's lots of shade and it's beautiful, and all those other amenities that go with the transportation function. And then we also deal with transit projects. So I don't know, some of you who live here maybe have seen this new bus-only lane that runs through downtown Honolulu, basically taking one whole lane and saying this is for buses. There's so many buses on this street that it's important for us to have a bus-only lane and make sure the bus can be efficient. And then we also have projects like this shows out in East Kapolei, a number of projects helping people get to and from the new rail stations or the future rail stations out there. So some bus stops at the stations, crosswalks, all that stuff. We follow several guiding documents, planning documents, that you guys will probably want to reference in your project. One is the Oahu Bike Plan, and that lays out desired bicycle routes all across the island. And then Daniel has been the project manager putting together our first ever pedestrian plan, which we will be releasing in draft form shortly. And those identify crash hotspots for pedestrians, priority missing sidewalk segments, and other priority pedestrian corridors. So some of the common, sort of issues that we see on streets, a lot of them have to do with streets being too wide. So some of our common crash corridors. So arterials with 4 or more lanes tend to have more crashes than streets with, say, 2 or 3 lanes. Where speed limits are over 30 miles per hour, we see more crashes. Signalized intersections, the same thing, these sort of wide crossings where pedestrians are trying to get across 4 or more lanes of traffic at once. And then signalized intersections, there are a lot of conflicts, right? So intersections are where, multiple directions of traffic come together, and there's a lot of different maneuvers and large potential for incidents. So signalized intersections don't seem to fare, I don't think, that much better than non-signalized intersections, probably because they're just busier. But again, it's usually where we have lots of lanes for people to cross. So these are just some of the things to kind of keep an eye out for if you're out on the street looking for conditions that are or are not safe. Another issue related to the multi-lane is some of our pedestrian crossings. So you guys may have experienced this before. Say you have a crosswalk across 4 lanes of traffic, and these people are waiting to cross, so they'll step out. There's no signal here, right? We're just relying on drivers to stop and to yield. This guy will step out, but because this person in the black car can't see these people walking behind the bus, they may zip right through. So these multi-lane roadways, again, create some safety challenges for pedestrians trying to get across the street, and it's something we gotta address. And so here's some tools for that, right? You can put some median islands in the middle, so pedestrians only have to focus on crossing one direction at a time, or you can also look at reducing lanes where the volumes are low enough. So this is an example in Kalihi, where we had 4 lanes plus parking before, but the road was pretty over-designed for the number of cars that were using it, and people were having a hard time getting across because of some of those reasons I was mentioning. And what we did is we changed that to 1 lane in each direction, and then turning lanes in the center. And then by doing that, we created space for bike lanes on the side, and really made those crossings much simpler. And then you can see the real world safety benefits of that. This is, the red is before, that kind of road diet is what we call that, went in Kalihi Valley, and then the green is after. You can see, right, every year there's significantly fewer crashes than before. Another tool in our box is something called curb extensions. So these are at intersections, and they basically take up space that is really not needed for anybody. You can't park at the intersection anyway because you'll block visibility. And so we like to use different kinds of curb extensions to shorten pedestrian crossings where they are most exposed. So these are obviously built in concrete, and there's some planters in it. This is off Kapahulu Avenue. And then these are ones that we actually did with the community there, just with paint and plastic posts, but basically serve the same function. So just something to put in your guys' toolbox. And then I did also want to share, you know, the idea of roundabouts is something that we use a lot, something you guys might want to consider in your project. Roundabouts typically replace either a stop control or a traffic signal controlled intersection. And they have fantastic safety results. You can see about an 80% reduction in crashes when you convert from a signal to a roundabout. They do take up a lot of space, and this is, of course, a single lane roundabout out in Eva. Some of the bigger intersections you have to get to like a 2-lane roundabout, which gets kind of complicated. But again, you can see some of the sort of safety tools that we have in sort of in our toolbox and that we use in our projects to make the road safer for everybody out there. And then protected bikeways. So I was talking about how traditionally we just had kind of a white stripe on the pavement and said, okay, here's the bike lane, sort of like this example here, right? But a lot of people don't feel comfortable biking where there's just paint. So we're moving towards doing more protected bikeways, where you actually have a buffer and then some kind of vertical element protecting you from traffic. And these can be either one way on either side, and this is Ward Avenue, the new facility there, or you can have a 2-way facility on one side, and this is South Street. King Street is also like that. And interestingly, sorry, we have a baby here. Interestingly, these bike facilities are, obviously they're good for bikers, but we're also showing that they're good for pedestrians too. So this shows the crash experience on King Street with the bikeway that went in there in 2014. So you can see before the bikeway went in, there were a pretty significant number of pedestrian crashes every year. And since the bikeway has gone in, the pedestrian crashes have gone down and down every year, which is very interesting because we didn't actually make any pedestrian improvements. But it just shows that, you know, sometimes better roadway design and better facilities for some users kind of create a sense of order and create a better sense of awareness of everybody out on the street. So let me do a quick flip through some of our current projects just to give you a sample, and these are all on our website if you want to look for more information, and then we'll jump to the project corridor that we've identified for you guys. So University Avenue is a project that Daniel runs, and it goes basically from the bottom of University Avenue all the way up through the University of Hawaii Manoa campus. There are a number of different elements being proposed in that project, but as you can see, maybe at the bottom here, one of them is protected bikeways. So going, you know, 1 lane in each direction. And then there's some green conflict paint there we try to put in to alert drivers to pedestrian conflicts with bicycles. But we've got sort of shortened crossings at the intersections, like we're talking about with the bulb outs. You know, some sidewalk improvements, street tree improvements, and we're looking at green infrastructure as well to allow that stormwater to get down into the ground. Nearby, connecting to University Avenue project sort of ends here near Alawai Elementary and the parks. We also are looking at Alawai Boulevard, doing some bikeways there, and then we've got a new pedestrian bicycle bridge that is planned at the bottom of University to connect to Waikiki. Not all of this has to be in town or in cities or in you know, super urban places. We do have a project in Haleiwa, one of our kind of historic main streets on the North Shore of Oahu, where a lot of tourists walk around. And currently today, there are no sidewalks. There's really no facilities for people to walk. So this is sort of a rendering of the project. going to be paving the shoulder with some permeable paver blocks, similar to what I showed before, and creating a dedicated protected space for people to walk. Pearl City, we've got some new sidewalks proposed there in the residential neighborhood, and then some flashing beacons where some of the more high volume, high speed roadways are where people are trying to cross the street. Kailua, we have a number of projects proposed there. A lot of them are looking at creating these sort of separated paths and separated bikeways to allow people to get around. They have a lot of missing sidewalks in Kailua. We have selected a street in Honolulu for you guys to take a look at. This is actually a project that we would like to undertake. And we put in a budget request this year to start that process. And being, you know, the pandemic and kind of a tight budget year, we actually did not get funding yet. So we don't have the solution for this street. So we're looking to you guys to help provide some ideas for what we can do there. So Eisenberg Street connects between, sort of connects between the H1 freeway and Kapiolani Boulevard. It runs through the Makalimo-Ili'ili neighborhood and is quite close to the University of Hawaii. Actually, Daniel, do you want to do the overview? Let me pass it off to Daniel. He pulled the slides together.
All right.
Sure. Yeah, so Eisenberg Street, not far from UH, like Renee mentioned. And here's the Google Street View of it. You're looking down and you can see there's a nice park to the right. That's an old stadium park. There used to actually be a stadium there. And you have some businesses on the left. And then as you look further down, you can see residential. There's high-rise apartment buildings there.
Okay, sorry, Daniel. I think you're not sharing your screen. Possibly. Yeah, 'cause
I think, is Renee still sharing the slides?
Yeah, it says we're seeing Renee's screen. So
Yeah,
I think she might
good.
have to.
I can see it.
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing. I'm going to go with the slides that she had.
Oh,
She can
okay, I
just
see.
skip
All right,
along.
I see. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So, there's a street, and maybe flip to the next slide, Renee. I did, if you could let me share screen for a second, Renee. And before we go, just, we have this concept of a walk audit. And that concept is that we go on to a street and we bring community members and we look at the street and try to think of areas that it might need improving. So we're going to quickly just do a virtual walk audit. It's, of course, a much different experience if you're there in person because you can see the speed of the traffic. You can feel it in a different way. But this is what we've got here. So the beauty of Google Maps nowadays, and here I'm just going to Google Eisenberg Street. So wherever you are, you can do the same thing, but I'm going to drop down here. So it's taken us onto Eisenberg, and I'm going to go into Google Street View. And this is a really valuable planning tool. Nowadays, these maps and images are updated every couple of years or so, and we can use them for even planning. We've used them extensively, for example, in our Oahu pedestrian plan as part of our inventory to understand what's out on the street. So I'm just going to go a little bit here just so you get a sense of the street. And I want you to start thinking about how the street is experienced for the different roadway users. So we see cars, how it would be experienced as a motorist, how it would be experienced as someone walking, maybe someone with a mobility device, a mobility limitation, and how it would be experienced by someone bicycling. So we've gotten a little character of it. We went from the more commercial side and we've worked our way down to the more residential side. First person, please jump forward and let me know one reflection on how this street is. You can pick what type of mode you want to talk about, whether you want to talk about the experience from a driver, a bicyclist, or a pedestrian. Speak up,
All right,
please.
I can jump in for the group here. So I'll talk about it from a pedestrian standpoint because I walked down the street before, and so it looks like the only cross marking I can see is all the way towards Kapiolani. So it seems like if I just wanted to cross over to I think it's the bowling alley, or used to be the bowling alley, I'd have to walk either down towards Kapiolani or back towards King Street to cross.
Yeah, that's one, I think, really important feature is that as a pedestrian, there's this, it's about 1,100 feet, so a fifth of a mile, where there are no crossings. So if you want to get to the park and you're on this side of the street, you've got to go down, maybe potentially quite a bit out of your way in order to cross. Anything else as a pedestrian? What about bicyclists? Anyone have an idea of what the experience would be as a bicyclist on the street? It looks like maybe someone in the classroom is going to talk. Roger, you got someone there?
They're getting ready to talk. Yes, I think Bea has a few thoughts.
Oh, I was gonna let students to figure out, but then there's no bike lane.
Yep. So there's no bike lane. So bicyclists would just be, you know, here in the street with the cars. And how many people feel comfortable with that? How many people would be ready to go biking on the street as it is?
I wouldn't.
Well, all right. Anyone say yes?
Maybe in the middle of the night. I don't know. Definitely not when there's cars on it.
Yeah. So the street definitely is not what we consider a bike-friendly street. You know, it's just fine for someone that's really experienced and fine going out there and riding fast and being with the cars. But for most people, like Renee was saying, the large portion of people really need a separate place to bicycle to feel safe and comfortable doing so. And the street doesn't have that. And I worked my way a little further Mackay or towards the ocean. And you see now there's this crossing here and there's no traffic signal. So another one of the concepts that Renee mentioned, what happens when you have two cars and a pedestrian? So if this car stopped for a pedestrian here and the pedestrian started walking out, this car might be approaching and not realize that there's a pedestrian there because their line of sight is being blocked by the other vehicle. And that could create a real danger for that pedestrian crossing. And so even some of these crossings we do have, you know, really aren't the best from a pedestrian safety perspective. And I'll just point out one more thing for motorists. So the more lanes you have to cross when you say make a left turn, the more potential conflicts you have, the more that motorist has to look and factor in the speed of those approaching motorists to figure out if they have an appropriate gap. And also, the faster other vehicles are going, the more danger that poses to everyone, including people in cars and people walking, people on bikes. And when you have a street like this, it's really easy for someone that wants to drive fast to weave in and out and go as fast as they want. They don't get stuck behind the law-abiding person that's going the speed limit. Instead, they can, you know, just treat it like a speedway as they want. So that's kind of a little flavor of our street. I'm going to give up the screen so we can go back to, where's my stop share? Stop share. Renee, can you jump back in the presentation? All right, so we got a sense of the street. You know, if you did this with a group of people, what you'd be looking for is, all right, what is, you know, it's kind of a community engagement tool. You figure out what those people think are important and get some ideas that you might want to work on. But then you got to dig in and you got to start looking at the data. So next slide. So one really important piece of data is how much traffic, vehicular traffic, how many cars are on the street. And the way that we collect this data is we do what's called an average daily traffic. So we'll normally go out for 2 days and we do a traffic count for the whole of that period. So 24 hours. And then we come up with how much traffic there is. And so you see here, it's you know, a little over 6,000 vehicles a day. And then kind of another concept that Renee mentioned, a lot of times we do design design for the peak hour when the most traffic is there in that morning rush hour and that afternoon rush hour. But we don't necessarily want to do it, but we at least want to understand what the traffic volumes are during that hour to understand at the most congested point how that street is going to be experienced for vehicular traffic. So here it shows the AM peak on the left and then the PM peak on the right. And you can see there's definitely a lot more traffic in the afternoon. But, you know, 757 vehicles, that's how many we're experiencing on that street in the afternoon from 5 to 6 p.m. Next slide.
Daniel, let me just correct your ADT is 9,000.
Oh, sorry.
6,000 in one direction and 3,000 in the other. That was it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. Sure. So another really important thing we want to look at is history of injuries. You know, we saw that we had some of the factors that suggested the street was unsafe, but are we experiencing that in the actual data? And so this here shows the map on the right is our high pedestrian injury locations. This was mapped as part of our Oahu pedestrian plan. And you can see on the corridor, Eisenberg and Date Street, which is kind of near the middle. That's one of the high pedestrian injury locations. The street as a whole is not, did not really have super high levels of pedestrian injuries, but we do have at least one problem intersection along the way. The high pedestrian injury doesn't mean there weren't any pedestrian injuries. It just means it didn't meet a very high threshold. It said it's a street that we're really concerned about. So you can see here on the left, that's 5 years of data from basically ambulance responses. And so we have some pedestrians, and we actually have quite a lot of motorist injuries. Just, you know, the hazards out there aren't just to vulnerable users or people on bicycles and our people on foot, but also to motorists. And so about 4.5 people per year have been getting injured on the street, which isn't great. You know, that's life's changed. That's, you know, cost and, you know, maybe permanent injuries for those people, maybe life-changing, at the lowest end, a really bad day for them. So next slide. So one of our plans, so we always look to our plans to see what we should be considering for the street. These are master plans that talk about what we want to accomplish at a network perspective. So looking at all the streets in the city and county of Honolulu. And you see the map on the right is the Oahu Bike Plan. And it shows a dotted blue line on Eisenberg Street. And so that is a proposed bike lane. So that's one thing we should be considering. Our bicycle master plan said, hey, this is an important street. We need to connect to create better bicycle access to the community as part of the bikeway network. And then just noting for the Oahu pedestrian plan, it is an important street for people walking. but it already has walkways, so it's not proposed for any new walkways. It doesn't mean that it might not need pedestrian enhancements, but it already has at least walkways.